Okay, so we're ready to get into our second session with 3 new exciting speakers. The first of which, she is doing a master's in cross-cultural studies, communications. She's come to the UK, she's mastered English as a second language, and today she is here to talk about how children with learning differences can utilize digital tools to enhance their academic studies. So please welcome Celine onto the stage on her talk about education in the digital age.
Okay, who here wants to become a superhero? Please can you raise your hand? That's really great, thank you. Without knowing, you might actually already am one, or you might be sitting next to one. People with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, are like superheroes. This is because they have many superpowers. Their wandering minds, for instance, gives them the endless ability to create. Their atypical traits gives them the mighty power to feel and root for the misfits and the underdogs. They're fearless for consequences, make them capable of taking sensible risk. The powerless goes on. However, just like every Superman has his kryptonite, those with ADHD tend to have their fair share of weaknesses. For me, learning was one of those kryptonites. Unaware of my cognitive differences, I fell far behind at schoolwork around the age of 12. In addition to that, my then rather severe ADHD symptoms made it difficult for me to make friends or fit in at school. Feeling frustrated and rejected, I ended up spending my final year of middle school at home. By the end of that year, I couldn't get into high school. I went on to a teacher's college where academic demands were far less intense. But I was fortunate because my mother, who was then a single parent, was very open-minded. She did not impose too much control over me when I decided to spend my entire year at home dedicated to surfing the internet. Now, as surprising as this may sound, my year of being an internet slob did not turn out fruitless. After months of immersing myself in online films and literature, many of which are English, not only have I developed a keen interest for the creative industry, I have also taken my English skills to a brand new level. Growing up in southern China, I was a native user of Cantonese and Mandarin. Never have I ever been to an English-speaking country until about a year ago when I would begin my studies here in the UK. Now, apparently, knowing only one foreign language in today's globalized world is everything but a grand accomplishment. However, by having a good command of only a few of the world's most used languages, you can still benefit a great deal from it. For instance, by having native-like accents, our speech became more persuasive. To cast influence and communicate effectively became an easier task. Cultural adjustment was also less challenging. With language skills, we can easily switch between or fit into different cultural settings. Importantly and personally, knowing English, the universal language of science, had enabled me to research about my learning difference. I've developed coping strategy. Having developed that coping strategy, my academic performances quickly saw improvement. Starting off by receiving a language test score that meets the standards of most universities around the world. More recently, the latest pieces of my undergraduate assignments have all achieved first-class mark. I am now continuing my learning as a master's student of media and communication, which is a professional field I have fallen in love with ever since the age of 12. Now, looking back, the 12-year-old me had unintentionally learned a set of life-changing skills following her own interest. The skills she had learned helped her become more competent both culturally and globally. What's more important, the skills her learning take place entirely in a digital environment. So, does this mean that learners who feel helpless in reality all find salvation in the virtual world as I once did? And if so, why? I believe the reason is yes, for the following reasons. First, for learners with ADHD, one of the greatest barriers to learning tends to be motivation. This is because ADHD brains naturally has an insufficient release of dopamine, a chemical known to impact motivation. Such being the case, digital learning, when well facilitated, are proved by research in many instances to better support learner motivation comparing to traditional methods. And it's not just learner motivation that digital tools can better support. Visually stimulating apps and interfaces are proved to enhance learner engagement. The interactive and collaborative features of many apps and digital learning agents can effectively develop teamwork skills. Most important of all, children with ADHD are much more likely to get rejected or left out by their neurotypical peers. The same applies for those with invisible disabilities like autism. This is because children with invisible disabilities don't always act or behave as what we expected as normal. The rejection they receive at traditional classroom may easily translate into depression and in turn undermine their learning outcome. Digital learning, which can be completed individually, may therefore be a better alternative for those who struggle socially. These are just few of the many ways that digital tools can support children with learning difficulties. Together, they outline an exciting and inclusive future for secondary and primary education. What is more exciting is that such future has become a reality in many parts of the world. In the US, where it has over 90% of the world's virtual school, middle and high schoolers can now attend virtual schools rather than physical ones. Similar services are provided in Europe, Japan, and Canada, only on a much smaller scale. Very recently, since 2017, such service was also made available in China by nonprofit organizations. Well, as charming and beneficial as digital learning may seem, we mustn't overlook the many risks attached to learning online. Addiction, for one, can be especially prevalent among children and teenagers with ADHD. This is because they run a higher risk of internet addiction compared to their neurotypical counterparts. This is why most digital learning should take place under parental supervision. To further prevent digital harm, it may be necessary for parents to inject children with values and skills to navigate themselves through the dangers and temptation online. I was fortunate to have found a digital shield to protect myself from the radiation kryptonites give off. However, many living in the developing world where ADHD was a much overlooked issue don't. Whereby life with ADHD for me can be challenging, yet ever so rewarding. Many others live their lives in endless series of temptations and rejections, imprisoned by their circumstances, having nowhere to escape. These people include some of my own family members. This is why I advocate using digital tools in combating ADHD. Not only because it was a cure to ADHD, nor was it because it is a perfect solution to learning difficulties, but rather because it is a tool accessible by all. an opportunity for those imprisoned superheroes to break free from their own circumstances, to truly take initiative of their own life and become the master of their own fate. Thank you.